fix these programs.
And if my producer will remind me, I want to return to a discussion about Social Security, Medicare, and how we reduce the deficit. But let me just give you a chance to clarify some of the comments that Mr. Atkins and Mr. Conway made about the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Do you deny that you said that, and is there any clarification that you would like to add?
I never said that I believed in anything remotely regarding segregated lunch counters. I never said I was for repeal of the Civil Rights Act, which is what Jack said over and over again on Chris Matthews' show, and then Chris Matthews came back on the next day and said Jack Conway was lying, and it was false what he was saying, and he ginned up a lot of interest on this. So he had some success, but he was being dishonest. And this has been a recurrent theme, that he's been dishonestly trying to represent something and then run against it because he doesn't want to run against someone who's talking about the balanced budget and term limits and reading the bills. The Tea Party movement is amazingly big and strong. We had 1,000 people in Paducah the other day. People are tired of the career politicians. They want an outsider. They want someone new, and that's what this election will be about.
Anyone can go to that videotape. Watch what he said on NPR, watch what he said in the Courier Journal editorial board interview, watch what he said on Rachel Maddow. He said that had he been in the Senate, he would have been seeking to modify the lunch counter provision. I mean, it's on tape. And I think those are issues that we settled. We settled those issues a half a century ago in these countries. We need to go forward. We don't need to go back in this election.
Before we leave foreign policy in the war, let me ask you one more question. This comes from a piece that Tom Brokaw wrote just last week when he said that in Afghanistan and Iraq, we've lost 5,000 of our men and women. There are 30,000 that have been wounded, and we've spent $1 trillion on combat operations. He asked this question, why aren't the wars and the human and economic consequences front and center in this election? We've talked a lot about jobs in the economy. How do you answer the question that we need to spend a lot more time thinking about those men and women and the 30,000 that will come back here to the United States maimed?
Well, I think we ought to. I mean, I think we ought to be talking about it more. You know, my father served in the military. I didn't. He served in Germany for 2 years in guarding missile silos during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I've talked to him a lot about being in the military. And our brave men and women make an extreme sacrifice. And we're in a state that has Fort Knox. We're in a state that has Fort Campbell. If I get elected to the U.S. Senate, I'm going to ask to be on either the Veterans Affairs or the Armed Services Committee, just because I think it's that important to this particular state. And one thing I understand, we have 300,000 veterans in this state. We've got 50,000 wounded, disabled veterans. We have 12,000 newly disabled veterans since 9/11. We've got to stand up for their benefits. I mean, my opponent at one point said that we're going to have to look at cutting veterans' benefits. He's spoken out against the Americans with Disabilities Act. I don't think we ought to be telling soldiers like Mike Cleland, just take your office on the first floor. I think we need to be talking about these wars. I think we need to be talking about the cost. We need to talk about the cost that has happened to other countries. I mean, we've had civilians killed in those other countries, too.
Dr. Paul?
Well, I think once again he's dishonest, misrepresenting my position to try to say something about the ADA or to say I'm against veteran benefits. They're completely untrue. Lexington Herald corrected him on this, but no shame. It doesn't seem to change.
What is your position then? Just clarify that.
I'm not opposed to the ADA and never have said anything about being opposed to the ADA.
Did you ever say that people should just take their office on the first floor?
What I would say about the war is that the war is an enormous hardship and a cost, and that we have the greatest nation ever known. We have the most mighty defense and military around the world, and I think we can win any war, and we can and should when we need to. But I don't think we're very good at nation building, and I think some nations defy that. Afghanistan may well be a nation that defies nation building, and there comes a time when this discussion does have to happen. I do want to be a part of that national debate about saying, how long is long enough? And I think we really do need to have a real discussion in this country about, is 10 years long enough? Should the Afghans be stepping up to patrol their streets?
Rand and I don't agree on much, but I think we do. The United States military is very good at winning battles. We're very good at winning the military ground game. But when we get to these political questions at the end of wars, what's the exit strategy and how do we leave behind countries better off than when we found them, and that we need to make certain that we're talking about that and doing so in a responsible way.
Do you agree with him on that point?
I thought I heard him say something there where he said that we're not all that, you know, nation building and all this sort of stuff. I think before you ever commit troops to war, you need to think, okay, how are we bringing them home? What's the end goal? What's realistic? rather than just pounding on the table saying, win the war, win the war, win the war, we need to make certain that we understand the human toll of this. And I thought I heard him say something like that, and I would agree with that.
All right, quickly on health care. An email tonight from Jeffrey Guil from Paducah. He writes, Mr. Conway, why do you support the health care system known as Obamacare? Dr. Paul, why do you oppose it?
Okay, where do you want to start? Me. First of all, I think it's pretty clear. I would like to fix the health care bill. It's not a perfect bill. I'm on record saying I would have voted for it.
Mend it, not end it?
Right. He wants to repeal it. And I can tell you this, I'm not for a $2,000 deductible in Medicare, which seems to be his plan for Medicare. I have a friend, Bill. I've got a friend, I was actually in his wedding. He's one of my closest friends who had a kidney transplant 18 years ago. And he's told me on numerous occasions that how hard it is to get health coverage because of his pre-existing condition. You know, now under the law, he can get health care coverage. You know, we've got 654,000 Kentuckians getting coverage for the first time. We have 19,000 kids that can stay on their parents' plan longer. You know, we have women who are going to get mammogram screenings, and there are additional protections for them. I know he said at one point here recently that breast cancer research ought to be brought down to the local level. Well, UK and U of L get millions of dollars in breast cancer research. It's an issue that, funding for breast cancer research, it's an issue that got Jane Bashir so hopping mad that she felt compelled to speak out about it. It's not a perfect bill. It's not a perfect bill.
What parts would you keep? What parts would you keep, and what parts would you agree that need to be repealed?
Here's what we need to do, and this gets back to your earlier question about how you want to visit shoring up Medicare. It made no sense to me in talking about trying to achieve savings in Medicare that a sweetheart deal was cut with the pharmaceutical companies that didn't allow Medicare to negotiate for lower prescription drug prices. I know from being Attorney General, we monitor the Medicaid system. The Medicaid system negotiates for lower prices. The VA system negotiates for lower prices. If Medicare were allowed to do that, Bill, it would be $200 billion. That's $200 billion with a B in savings. That's some real money. We need Medicare fraud units in each and every state. I know from having Medicaid fraud units on the ground in each and every state that we're able to stay close and understand what's going on and ferret out fraud. The problem with Medicare is it's done from a big bureaucracy. I mean, put it in the AG's office or put it in some other office, but just have someone on the ground, and there's potentially $100 billion in Medicare fraud out there. So there are ways that they could shore up Medicare without just taking the pharmaceutical companies off the table in that grand bargain they had at the start of the healthcare debate.
Mr. Paul, are there no positive elements of the healthcare bill that you would, even if you went for repeal, that you would reinstitute in some sort of new bill?
One of the great ironies of this whole debate over deductibles is that when I spoke of deductibles, I spoke of ways to try to fix the problem in the future, not on current retirees and not on near current retirees. But the interesting irony is under Obamacare, with Jack's supports, deductibles are already going up. Medicare Advantage patients, 11 million of them, will have higher deductibles under Obamacare, which he supports. So there's some sort of twist in irony. Who will it affect?
When does that go into effect?
A lot of them go into effect gradually. The other thing that's going to happen is all the way up through 2017, out-of-pocket costs for Medicare Advantage. Not only is it hurting the people on the receiving end of Medicare Advantage, Humana sells a lot of it. It's hurting Humana, which is a big presence in Louisville as well.
Aren't some of those increases offset by some of the savings? Isn't that in the bill? Isn't that one of the things?
There's a lot of shuffling of money going around, and that's the other great irony of this, is that Medicare is short of money now because of the demographics, because of the baby boomers retiring. Medicare is short, but guess where they got $500 billion? They took $500 billion out of Medicare and put it into Obamacare. So we have a brand new entitlement program, and we were already having trouble funding the current entitlement programs. Obamacare is going to be worse than we can even imagine.
The three areas that are in effect, went into effect in August. Illegal to deny coverage to children, illegal to take away insurance coverage from anyone when they get sick. Insurance companies cannot charge copays for preventive care. You opposed to all of those?
What I would like to see is a more market-oriented approach. The problem is, and this is a problem because some things can sound really good on the face of it, but right now I buy insurance and I'm healthy, but I buy it in case I might get sick. If you tell me I can get it for the same price after I'm sick, why do I buy it? If you give perverse incentives to customers to say, why buy insurance, then what happens is healthy people drop out and the system becomes more burdened with sick people. Oh. It's destroying a marketplace. You need to leave the marketplace. President Obama really is probably the most anti-business president we've ever had. He doesn't understand business. Very few people in his administration have been in business. I talked to a guy in Owensboro the other day. He's going to have a $400,000 fine Now, do we want everybody to have insurance? Sure. But if you put a $400,000 fine on an individual businessman, you put them out of business.
He's being fined for not offering insurance?
Right. He has temp
Even though
workers.
he will get some government help for that?
Right. He has temp workers. And the problem with temp workers, they add them all up and say they're equivalent to full-time workers, and he's got to pay a penalty for all the full-time workers.
Well, let me say that there are going to have to be some things that are going to be tweaked in this bill. I don't want to penalize employers, but we're going to have 45,000 small businesses in Kentucky that get assistance with premiums. And my opponent's on record is saying that we need to go back to the healthcare system we had in this country pre-World War II. Well, in pre-World War II, in America, the average person spent about $5 a year on health care. You couldn't readily get penicillin. I don't think anyone thinks that we're going back to that. And my opponent's running from the fact that he said on about 7 separate occasions he supports a $2,000 Medicare deductible. What happened with Medicare is that a lot of Medicare Advantage plans are being over-reimbursed. The reimbursement was tweaked. And now he's trying to conjure up this argument that, hey, deductibles are going up, because he has to run from his own words, because the seniors of Kentucky, in the world in which I live, the ones I talk to out there on the trail, they can't afford a 23% national sales tax. They can't afford a $2,000 Medicare deductible when the current deductible is $155. They just can't afford what Rand Paul's putting out there. He's wrong for Kentucky.
Or perhaps they can't afford President Obama's $1 trillion spending, President Obama's $2 trillion debt. The leader of your party, the guy you support in the primary, you're a kind of Democrat. You wanted President Obama, is a disaster for our country. He's bankrupting us, and you sit blithely over there and support his policies.
What do you say? Support him in the primary?
It's a disaster.
You just made something up.
President Obama's a disaster.
Dr. Ball, did you call for a $2,000 deductible?
What I said many times, and he shows snippets of the speech, which is intellectually dishonest to take things out of context, but not a new phenomenon. What I did say on many occasions was a higher deductible would help fix the problem, but would be politically unpalatable, would not be feasible. But there would be ways that maybe in the future, younger people might have to pay higher deductibles, and you might even have to do means testing. You might have to have people who have a racehorse might have to pay a little more of the cost of their Medicare. Well, I mean, I think that may be coming because we have to figure out how demographically we're going to pay for the baby boomers.
Does Mr. Conway own a racehorse?
I thought I heard that.
You know what, Bill? I do know in Kentucky that Kentuckians know you don't attack a man's dog and you don't attack a man's horse. But I will say this:
you can't attack a man's religion, right?
Well, I questioned your actions.
That's okay, right?
I questioned your actions, not your faith.
Yeah, right.
But let me say this: that he said $2,000 deductible. When we first brought it up, he said I didn't say that until we produced video of him saying it 7 separate times. And the same thing with the fair tax. He came out in favor of the fair taxes, which is a 23% national sales tax. His campaign manager sent out an email on it numerous occasions, and now he's having to run from his own words.
But the thing is you have a simplistic worldview. You oversimplify things. I mean, you do.
Are you talking down to me?
Well, I mean, the thing is you don't really want to present the whole facts. You say we're going to heap on some new sales tax if we're for a sales tax. You forget to mention we're talking about eliminating the income tax. Okay, you leave that out of all of your promotional
I know that 90%
items.
of the people have taxes go up.
Well,
and the seniors I talk to can't afford it, Rand.
It's incorrect because what it has an exemption for the first $50,000 worth of sales.
Did you come out for the national sales tax of 23%?
Well, no, because see, you don't listen. You oversimplify things into sound bites because all you care about is winning. I mean, you really don't want an intelligent discussion. What I've said from the very beginning and have discussed for a year and a half is that our problem is a spending problem, not a revenue problem. Our problem is the deficit. And I have said that when we can get that under control, then I want to simplify the tax code. The tax code is 16,000 pages long. We spend $239 billion complying with the tax code. That's equal to Walmart's gross receipts in a year. Yes, the tax code has to be simpler. One way of making it simpler would be a sales tax. Another way of making it simpler would be a flat income tax. Another way of making it simpler would be to lower all marginal tax all tax rates. The one thing that was the best government stimulus we ever had, the only type of government stimulus package that works, contrary to sort of, borrowing money from China to pay for this, the only thing that's ever worked is cutting tax rates. But I have been honest with the people of Kentucky since the very get-go. You can only cut taxes, you can only reform the tax code, you can only make it smaller if you are willing to cut spending.
All right, let's take our second phone call of the Kentucky Tonight program. Ms. Mary Hatfield from Harrison County. Ms. Hatfield, a question for Kentucky Tonight.
Yes, please. I saw a commercial on television today, Rand Paul against Jack Conway, and it insinuated that he was against abortion, but Jack Conway was for abortion. Jack Conway, I've met him. He told me he was a Christian. And what I would like to know, since both of them confessed to be Christians, I'm a little bit nervous, so you'll have to forgive me. But
you
I
want
would
to know their
like to
position on
know-
abortion?
I would like to know both candidates' views, and are they for or against, and if they're against it, what are they going to do to stop it? And that's my question.
All right, Ms. Hatfield, thanks very much.